on a positive note, you had Stephen Graham play you in a TV series, which we've already discussed. But what was that like? What was that like having Stephen Graham portray you in a TV? Like, that must be a totally mind blowing experience, not just for you, but I suppose your children and your family, right?
Well, my children haven't watched it. My children think I'm a lollipop man. No, it was extraordinary. I didn't realise how big and popular he was until I was in America and everyone knew who he was. Look, he's an extraordinary person. I also have to say his wife is as well, because his wife is like the gatekeeper. So she did the interviews, and it was good. And of course, I've got the Scouse accent in the show, because he was filming two things at the same time, because it was just during and just after lockdown. So I guess, like anybody else, he had to finish what work he'd started. And so he couldn't do Matilda and do the walk-in and have two different accents. I mean, it would have driven him wild. So the only concession I had was that his children in the show had to be Crystal Palace supporters. But no, very, very, really pleased that I was played by Stephen Graham. And overall, I was really, really pleased with how the show portrayed what happened. It was about 90% accurate.
In the film Matilda, Stephen Graham actually speaks with some sort of a London accent. So that completely throws out of the water what Matthew Collins is saying. The most likely reason why he chose to use his own accent rather than speaking like Matthew Collins is because both Matthew Collins and Nick Lowles are two of the most uncharismatic people you could ever wish to meet. So in order to make the programme interesting and exciting and things like that, I think they used quite a bit of artistic license. But it had nothing to do with trying to film in two different accents at the same time. Also, you get lots of actors that play multiple parts in the same role. Mike Myers in Austin Powers and things like that, who put on multiple accents in the same film. So it's an absolute load of rubbish by Matthew Collins, as usual.
National Action was the most extraordinary, secretive and sophisticated organisation. They were very, very young men, so they were very, in terms of technically, they were very, very sophisticated. They bragged that Hope Not Hate could never, ever, ever get into their group. We were at the time, I was at the time, almost 24 hours a day reading their innermost thoughts and quite sickening desires, much of which were focused on my family and I.
If he had written evidence that they were planning attacks on his family, he would have got them done. Hope Not Hate work with the police, they work with the government. They've got people in Parliament that are attached to their organisation. If there was any threat to his family, they would have got done. And if for whatever reason the police didn't do him, he would have published something or whatever.
Without further ado, I wanted to introduce the walk-in, the show. You're played by Stephen Graham in it. I'll play the clip now, and please do check it out. It's so gripping. It's so fascinating to actually watch a dramatisation of it. So let me just hope that I can do this technically and make it work.
Well, yeah, he was one of the leading lights in the far right in this country.
I've written a piece about National Action being a big step from the far right.
That's me, in that photograph, 20 years ago.
We need to be stronger, ready for the war that's coming.
We've got to get someone inside this group. I did some bad things.
You're not that person anymore. I don't think it's good for you on your own. You need to mix with people more.
Waarom ze dingen nodig de poppen gebracht het? If they are planning something, we won't know about it until it's too late.
We need that walking.
Why do you want to join National Action? I get frustrated. First sign of any trouble, you call me. What is his name? He's trying to help us. You're out of your depth.
Are we going to have to move again?
So okay, tell them. Find them.
What's going on, Robbie?
Nothing is going on. This is the murder of an MP. Exactly what National Action have been waiting for.
So really, really gripping stuff there. So I really do recommend you check it out for the full story. But listen, you were there. That's you. Give us the blow by blow with basically when you started to suspect that there was going to be, that these guys weren't just online cosplayers, that they were serious and that they were considering, their own kind of attacks, basically.
Well, we were, like I said, we had access to their innermost, darkest thoughts and fantasies. not from us, obviously, but I think there was something in society that says it tends to be all right if they're white and they say things like that, because, white boys are all jibber jabber and, they're not like they're Muslims or anything. But initially, when they first started, we thought, yes, they pose a threat to mainly anti-fascists or socialists or trade unionists. And we watched it sort of ferment to the point where, infamously, I said, if it talks like a terrorist, it walks like a terrorist, which they were doing, then it is terrorist. And by the time it was banned in 2016,
he's trying to imply there that white people are less likely to get treated like terrorists, when in actual fact it's the opposite that's true. You see what got National Action banned, and then you look at some of these black gangs in places like Brixton that declare that they own a whole estate and things like that. They put all these videos out challenging rivals, and they're allowed to carry on operating. And when you look at the Islamic organisations that have been banned, they've either been openly endorsing terrorism like ISIS, or they've been banned for basically just for being anti-Israel.
It's quite interesting. I mean, there were quite serious flaws in the way the government knew and understood how the extreme far right operated in this country, because the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, said basically, yes, they're anti-Semitic and they're homophobic, which of course the entire far right in Britain is anti-Semitic and homophobic.
I don't like using the term far right. I feel it's outdated. But when Matthew Collins and Hope Not Hate use the term far right, they're referring to a broad spectrum of people, including people like Tommy Robinson and Nigel Farage, who are completely and utterly pro-Israel. I can't see how anyone could find either of those two people anti-Semitic. 6 months or a year ago, one of Collins' colleagues, Georgie Lamin, was on a podcast, and she claimed that as soon as Elon Musk took control of Twitter, he reinstated Tommy Robinson. And this is completely false. It took a year for him to reinstate Tommy Robinson. And what he did is, literally as soon as, I say he, what his company did, as soon as Israel started bombing Gaza, they put back on the platform several pro-Israel people like Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins. So Hope Not Hate like to try and put the narrative across that everyone's anti-Semitic. And because Hope Not Hate get a lot of backing from Jewish people and support Israel.
And they glorified the murder of Joe Cox, and they encouraged others to murder Joe Cox. To replicate the murder of Joe Cox. But I still don't think they necessarily took it seriously. In her speech, Amber Rudd didn't seem particularly, on top of exactly what made National Action different from groups like the EDL or groups like the BNP. And I just knew that although there would be this attitude, well, they're just a bunch of white boys. And how prescription happens is, you'll be interested to know, it's basically you receive a letter in the post and it says, "Dear Mr. Smith, from next Friday, we've deemed your organisation a terrorist organisation. Please throw all your flags and leaflets in the bin and don't do it again." And that's basically what happened to National Action. And we later then had the opportunity to see, in the lead up to, in the immediate aftermath of the ban, how copying one or two particular Islamist organisations in this country, they just said, all right, we'll just change leaders and change our name and we'll carry on. And it's basically what they did. But we had someone, thankfully, in there who, slowly but surely we saw the nature of the language change. They shed one skin for another, which is, again, is a direct quote. And then they started talking about, now that they felt that they crossed the threshold. So by still meeting, they opened a bloody gym and they opened an office under the less than watchful eye of the government. So they were already terrorists anyway, by doing these things, by carrying on their associations. And they began to formulate an idea, a plan. So when will we actually commit acts of terrorism? When will we do that? and they felt they needed sparks to do it. And unfortunately, in the year 2017, there were a number of incidences of, Islamic terrorism. The worst, but not the only, I guess, was the Manchester Arena attack. In fact, on the night of that, I was in Manchester with Robbie Mullen, who was our person inside National Action. And I knew then that this sickness was very, very real when on the weekend after that, when, people like Tommy Robinson and others were demonstrating in Manchester to deport all Muslims and all this kind of rubbish, that National Action met as a unit and went down to watch people grieving. And, that made them excited because that was the sort of thing they were going to replicate. And they had an idea that they could one strike. So they said there would be 3 Islamic attacks in London, and then they would strike back with one. And fortunately for them, Darren Osborne, a rather disturbed bloke from Wales, drove his van from Cardiff to North London and then tried to attack an Islamic centre in North London. But we were seeing all these communications between them, and they were geared up to it and they were ready to do it.
Again, if they're seeing all these communications that they're gearing up for violence, they would have got them done. That's evidence. But they didn't, because they didn't see anything. And it's all just made up for their own ends, both politically and financially.
And then I took a very, very rare holiday. It's very difficult to get a holiday when you've got a partner and you've got young children and you've got a job that at the time was 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I took a 1-week holiday, and it was during that 1 week I was away where a young man, Jack Renshaw, went to the National Action leadership and said that he was going to kill his local MP, and he was also going to kill a policewoman, a particular policewoman who'd been investigating him for grooming. Now, his colleagues misunderstood what the grooming was. He was in fact being investigated for grooming young children. He was a pederast, he was a paedophile who had been trying to abuse young boys. And so I, on this rare family holiday, eventually took a phone call, and then there began this most incredible story, which The Walk-In takes up, where we, as journalists, we went to the police and said, this is the person who's going to kill, this is the MP they're going to kill, this is the plan, this is all this stuff. And the police said, brilliant. Long story short of it, by the way, you've broken the law. Because under one of the under some legislation in the year 2000, it then became illegal, and don't get me started on that, to talk to people who were engaged in illegal organisations. And so the Walk-In deals with quite a large part of that. But my colleague Nick Lowles and I, the deal we make with people that give us information is we will go to prison to protect your identity. I mean, that for us is non-negotiable. Otherwise, no one will ever trust you.
It's not illegal in the UK to talk to people that are in an illegal organisation. What is illegal is to be a member of or show support for an organisation that's prescribed under the Terrorism Act. Also, they claim to protect their sources when the actual programme showed them blackmailing someone, one of their informants, who they said if he didn't go undercover with what they claimed to be a terrorist organisation, that they would show pictures of him talking to Matthew Collins to the people he'd been informing on. So that's really looking after their sources, isn't it?
20 plus people since then have been arrested for preparation of terrorism. Almost every one of those arrests for hoarding documents or preparation of terrorism also includes an element of child sexual exploitation. Many times newspapers don't print it, but we were very, very aware. We're talking about people, Jack Renshaw, the one who was going to kill the MP in particular, had an obsession with having sex with children, and they believed that it was how you could desensitize yourself, was to engage in child sexual exploitation, and they made it pretty clear that my children would be a pretty good a pretty good practice, if you will, and also my mother. So we had to deal with all of that, and also the terrible.
He can't seem to get his story straight. To start with, he was saying that everyone's homophobic and that Jack Renshaw kept it from the rest of National Action that he was a paedophile. And then now he's saying that that was part of their game plan and they targeted his family, including his children. And again, they would be done for it, wouldn't they? If he had that evidence, as he claims to have, they would have been done for it, and they weren't.
Restrictions placed on Robbie Mullen, so he wasn't able to work. So we had to pay for his rent. We had to give him pocket money and spending money while we're hiding him. And Hope Not Hate's a terribly small organisation in reality, and we didn't want to be in dispute or sort of at war with the counter-terrorism officers. But anyway, as you can watch, all's well that ends well in the end, and Robbie and I both live happily ever after now. Not together, obviously.
Robbie Mullins isn't a refugee. There's no rules stopping him from working. What they're probably referring to is the fact that because there was a police investigation into him, that stopped him from getting certain jobs. But he wasn't a skilled person anyway, so he could have quite easily got a job that didn't have the high security checks. What's probably happened is Hope Not Hate have wanted to coach him for giving evidence both to the police and in court. And they wanted to maintain some sort of influence over him. So they've showered him with gifts, paid his rent, and this, that, and the other. I don't actually know any more than anyone else about this, but it definitely looks suspicious to me.
But there are people who have so many questions about where do they fit in society? Why can't they have things for nothing? What really is my birth rate? Why can't I have? Why don't I have? And a lot of these people we work with have this horrendous sense of loss, a sense of loss about things they've never actually had. And it comes down to, and I think social media is incredibly to blame for a lot of this. The growth of conspiracy theory is that people are, I think, more than ever before searching for answers. And whether we like it or not, and this is what I tell those meetings where I go and speak to the converted, the question isn't why do people join far-right groups? The question is why shouldn't they? Have we built a society? Have we succeeded in a society where they're not needed? And the problem is, and sometimes you want to shake people, they say, oh, well, we can just give everyone a house if we knock down Buckingham Palace. Oh, well, we can give everyone a house if we build more housing. But the question is, again, but now, tomorrow, when tomorrow 200 or 300 people will arrive on a beach in Kent, I'm sophisticated enough, allegedly, but I understand that that's a process. I understand that there are obligations. But for other people who view it, who have nothing, it's pointless shouting at them and telling them about these ideas we have about living in La La Land. So we have to understand that the far right is increasingly attractive to people who are increasingly damaged, who are increasingly divorced from civil society. Have we built society civil enough to withstand these pressures? Have we built society civil enough? Well, I think in some ways we have, because we put up with a lot. Look at the state of our water. Look at the expense of heating our homes. Look at our poor pensions. So in many terms, our society is quite civil to withstand a lot of things. But I also think some of that patience is eroding. You wouldn't believe in 21st century Britain, the 5th or 6th, will be 7th next week, richest economy in the world, probably 8th by Christmas. How few people you still meet who've never actually eaten out at a restaurant. The majority of people in this country don't like the idea that people are sleeping in hotels for free. And they think somehow that coming to this country on a boat over the English Channel has been particularly easy for them, and that somehow there's people in France and I'm going to go and live in England, I'm going to get a free mobile phone and I'm going to get a free television and I'm going to stay in a 5-star hotel. Let me tell you, any hotel you can get for £49 a night in London is not 5-star or decent.
The Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf, where they've started housing asylum seekers, is a 4-star hotel. I'm sure it costs a lot more than £49 a night. And while the government don't directly pay huge sums of money to these asylum seekers, I think the official figure is something like £9 a week for those not making their own food. Lots of money goes to them via NGOs. You've got all these dodgy charities that help refugees, and the government gives them money. They've got charity status. Do-gooders give them money. The National Lottery give them money, and the asylum seekers do get a lot. Not to mention that a lot of them are working illegally or stealing. They're doing all right for themselves. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. That's the end of today's video. I'd just like to say that I'm doing a podcast next Thursday, and I'm going to start doing a weekly podcast, hopefully. So if people could message me with any ideas they'd like to see, or anyone they think I should have a guest on the show, please do so. Thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe.